Hi, I'm Simon T. Bailey, and I am so deeply honored to interview Dr. Jean Watson. Dr. Jean Watson is the founder of the Watson Caring Science Institute. And today we are going to get into a specific question that I believe you want to listen to the answer that she's going to give us. And here's the question, Dr. Watson. How can caring science specifically help healthcare leaders leverage their systems, think in a fresh way by using caring science that impacts their relationships and their organizations?
Thank you for that wonderful question, because this is a really turning point for healthcare right now. So the need to shift to a different model of science becomes one of the first steps of this, where we have an evolved consciousness that we are all connected, that we can no longer keep this distancing and separation model of the objective empirical focus alone in our healthcare. We have to include the humans. And with that includes the consciousness of caring science. And caring science within it, there are actually the phenomena of human caring, of giving language and voice. Again, if you don't have your own language, you don't exist. So there's no phenomenon, there's no description or naming of the phenomenon of human caring until I've come up with these simple things. And it's nothing profound. We all know this, but they're invisible, they're ad hoc, and we don't systematically attend to them in terms of our personal life, nor as well as our professional. So the very first Caritas process has to do with our values and how do we sustain these values that call us into responding to health and healing and caring for humanity, whether you're in business or whether you're in healthcare. But the values can only be lived out through our own personal practice. And the first Caritas process is the personal practice of loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity for yourself. Because we are hard on ourselves as humans. If we stop and listen to the scripts that we give ourselves all the time, we're very judgmental, very blaming, we're very hard on ourselves. So having compassion and gentleness and love for ourselves and the practice of that compassion, if we don't have it for ourselves, then we're judging and we're blaming others. So that's one of the reasons we have all this distress in the world and violence, is because we don't have evidence of our own practice. Something's happened along the way to destroy somebody's heart and their loving kindness to themselves. And so therefore their hate, it brings out hate and violence for others. So the first practice is that personal practice. And then when you have that as your way of being, that allows you to have a different consciousness, a different patience, allowing for compassion and listening to another person's story, hearing them and seeing them, rather than judging and blaming and fighting and distancing. So that is the very first Caritas process. The next one has to do with the authenticity of our presence. Our human presence, I mean, we are so beautiful. We forget how beautiful we are as humans. And just being able to honor ourselves and see the beauty in other people. The ethics of face comes in here as part of the caring science framework. Again, Emanuel Levinas, he says, we cannot sustain our humanity at this point in human history unless we have a face-to-face connection. And he goes on to say, when you look into the face of another human being, you're looking into the mystery of it and the miracle of the human soul, the infinity of the human soul, the other, and it mirrors the infinity of your own soul. And again, if you don't have that face-to-face connection with that understanding of our connections, this belonging, then we actually can reduce another person down to a way that destroys their soul, so to speak. So the second Caritas process has to do with the authenticity of our presence and how we, in our presence, are able to enable the faith and hope and give new meaning for that person, helping them to find meaning in that situation, whether it's conflict or whether it's joy, but helping that person to elevate and find the faith and hope to sustain them. The third one has to do with being our own self-development. It's like being sensitive to ourselves enough and reflective. It's a reflective practice model. Being reflective and sensitive enough to ourselves and how we handle conflict, or how we handle anger, or how we handle hurt, whether we lash out or we react, or whether we're able to accept it with equanimity and not try to destroy ourselves through this, where we actually are loving ourselves and having a new level of reflection so that we can actually be authentically present to another person. The fourth one has to do with actually developing and sustaining those trusting, caring relationships. Within this framework of caring science, everything is done within the context of relationship, and particularly for administrators to realize, or leaders, that the concept of relational accountability is a lovely idea. You know, we're accountable, but we're accountable to the system, to the demands, to the task. But what about caring relational accountability? That's about the sustaining our caring, healing relationships, is the fourth Caritas process. And I'm elaborating them because they're more condensed, in terms of the literature. But the fifth one is one of the most significant ones that most people love. I had a physician call me a while ago, and he was telling me one of the nurses introduced him to the Caritas process, and he said, "This changed my life and my practice." And he told me the two that were so significant to him. He said number 5 and number 8. He's naming the Caritas process. So number 5 has to do with authentically listening to another person's story. And that, again, is like holding that sacred space, being able to authentically listen, not try to fix something, but everybody needs to be heard. And when you hear another person's story, we realize it could be our story. Anyone else's story could be our story. So it humbles us and brings a sense of reverence to that relationship in that moment. It keeps us in that unknowing space to honor this, and really realizing that it connects us with the great sea of humanity and hearing another person's story. So, and allowing for the positive and the negative expression. It's just as important, because there's research that shows this is actually healing for the person when they can express their positive and negative feelings. So the sixth one has to do with what traditionally was known as problem solving in nursing. We have all these problem solvings, assessment, evaluation, and intervention and outcomes, etc., in a very linear model. But in the Caritas processes, we have obviously acknowledged some issues and problems, but we reframe them to find people's strengths, and we look for creative solutions. And nursing is all about finding creative solutions with patients, and we see this daily in practices. And the seventh one has to do with, I forgot myself. It has to do with education, because we're always involved in teaching and learning. But in this model, we really work from the other person's frame of reference rather than our frame of reference. And we seek to hear the meaning that they have for the condition. We now know that beyond the diagnosis and beyond the terminology that we use for treatment or even caring, it's the meaning the person attaches to it that becomes the influence in the patients, the way they respond to this. So the education and their meaning of this, and learning to understand that information is not knowledge. And we give a lot of information. Information is not knowledge, and knowledge is not necessarily understanding. And understanding is not necessarily integrating it into your personal life to change your life or to use it, which would lead to wisdom in the fullest sense of the word. So all of this trajectory of a consciousness beyond just giving people information is part of the teaching and learning. And the eighth Caritas process has to do with creating a healing environment. And this is one that's, we become the environment. We can be in the physical environment. We can help that person reframe or repattern that environment through our presence, through our ways of introducing caring, healing modalities of touch, of tenderness, of robotherapy, or energetic modalities of healing touch, music, sound, aesthetics, etc. Those are all considered caring, healing, energetic modalities under this framework. But in the end, when it's all said and done, we can have the most beautiful environment, but in the end, the nurse or the human is the environment. We can have a beautiful environment, but you have toxic people in the environment and those institutional controls, it's not healthy. So that too is part of the transformation of creating a healing environment. And the ninth Caritas process has to do with this authentically assisting with another person's basic needs, or just holding that person and realizing the vulnerability, but also the dignity that's required. And it's really a sacred act. And that's where caring science becomes sacred science in the biggest level of this evolution of this work. And the 10th Caritas process has to do with being open. We don't have all the Western science, and all the technology does not offer us answers to all these spiritual and existential, mysterious unknowns about life and death and our human experiences that we are suffering and experiencing. So that too is being open to hold space for something new to happen and to find a different direction. So those are the 10 Caritas processes, and each one of those invites or points toward the creativity of the individuals, but also some patterns for how to have a micro practice with each one of these. Now, some of the things that are happening in the hospitals that are doing this work, they take one Caritas process a month and they work on this collectively at the unit level or the system level to explore, what does this mean to me personally? What does this mean to me professionally? What does this mean to our culture? What does it mean to the patient care that we're offering? So it's really helping to transform self and system intellectually and experientially. So you're not just fixing up the system. You're not just changing the rules and the patterns of the strategies that most of these hospital administrators come in with, these new attempts to regulate people rather than to authentically create a different culture of caring and healing and health.
Dr. Watson, here's our last question. Are the 10 Caritas processes that you've outlined, are they transferable to other industries, other environments, Wall Street, financial, hospitality, retail? Can leaders listening to us right now transfer them? And if so, how?
Well, by learning about them, by also learning about the model of science that holds them and evolving in our consciousness, because we're still all trapped in a Western model of science. But when you move into caring science holds these 10 Caritas processes and invites people into another culture within their organization to deal with the humans and the humanity and the creativity and the new solutions that they can forth, the imagination and the unknowns that they can cultivate by stimulating the spirit of the people and the education of the people, so that you have a shared consciousness in your culture, in your organization. And this is so important beyond nursing, but nursing, just as, most people now are understanding and operating under a mindset of Western science, but the future is going to be an evolved model of science. We see this happening all over the globe. I mean, I feel like there's a revolution in nursing around the world, because I was in as many as 18 countries one year, where I'm being invited because nurses are hungry. And it's not just nurses, the humanity is waking up to this higher need for our preserving humanity and the planet Earth. We cannot survive the way we have been operating. So organizations can be much more successful when they have this value system that's lived out through a philosophy, through an ethic, through concrete practices, and when they give voice and language to it, a vision that invites people into shared activities and projects that unite and inspire everyone.
Where can people find out more information and follow you and follow up with you?
WatsonCaringScience.org and Jean at WatsonCaringScience.org. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, Simon. I'm an admirer of yours and your leadership.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, everyone, you've heard Dr. Jean Watson. Please go and follow her immediately and begin to think about how you might incorporate some of the learnings into your system today. Thank you so much.